would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which I live and work, the Gundungurra land, and people. I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. I also want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which you, our listeners, are joining us from today. I recognise the deep connection that First Nations people have to this land, their enduring culture, and their commitment to the preservation and care for their country. This land was never ceded, and it always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Hey there, and welcome to Beyond the Surface, the podcast where we explore the stories of people who have survived religious trauma, left high control or cult communities, and are deconstructing their faith. I'm your host, Sam, and each week I'll talk with individuals who have taken the brave step to start shifting their beliefs that might have once controlled and defined their lives. Join us as we dig into their experiences, the challenges they've faced, and the insights they've gained. Whether you're on a similar journey or you're just curious about these powerful stories, you're in the right place. This is Beyond the Surface. Welcome, Elayna. Thanks for joining me.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I am super excited about this episode because I found you and you're probably the only person that I saw your Instagram and I immediately messaged you and I was like, I need this person on the podcast. And I mean, it's probably it's probably going to be no surprise because I suspect it will probably be in the episode title, but I'm going to go into a spoiler because usually I don't, but you have the coolest, what I would call pipeline or trajectory, which is from ex-Mormon to stripper, and I just think it's the fucking best. So I'm so excited.
I love that. I love that got your attention. And I was honestly on the fence about making that post, and then I was just like, I'm just gonna do it.
No, it's so good. I love it. Um, People are already obviously going to notice the accent difference. So for some context, where in the world are you at the moment?
I am in the United States on the West Coast.
Amazing.
On I'm in Oregon. I don't mind sharing where I'm at, which is I love that you had the little thing in your email of you want to pay attention and honor the land that this was traditionally on. So I looked up the tribe, and there's a few different tribes. There was the Umpqua and
Mm-hmm.
I'm probably not pronouncing this right. The
That's okay.
Sis, I'm going to look at this. Sislaw,
Mm.
Coquille tribe, and then there's also the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Round.
Mm-hmm.
So I think
Beautiful.
that sums it up. And so yeah, I just want to
Amazing.
honor them where they were, who the land
Yeah.
belongs to.
Yeah. I think even for myself, I'm not always super proficient at pronouncing Indigenous lands, but intention matters. And I think that that's the biggest thing. So beautiful. I feel like I'm doing the equivalent of like I'm being in therapist mode for a moment, which is you are in the US, and every US person I'm recording with at the moment, I'm doing what I would call a welfare check. So how are you doing over there? Because it's a little batshit crazy.
Oh my God. I'm hanging in there
Yeah.
personally. I want to do more
Yeah.
to to try and fix things because it is pretty batshit crazy right now. And I've been to a lot of protests, and I've been going to protests for like the last 10 years.
Yeah.
And so this, like doing this with you and posting on my Instagram and just raising awareness of this subject, that's kind of my own personal way of like protesting. Like,
Mm.
I, you know, I can go out there and scream and rant, and I actually have permanent lung damage from
Oh.
the police spraying tear gas on peaceful protesters.
Oh.
So like, I mean, I still will go do that. I'm not going to let that deter me.
Yeah.
But I feel like a lot of times people don't listen, and they see that and they just are like, oh, they're acting crazy, but they might listen to my Instagram reels or my
Yeah.
uh, YouTube or whatever, So I feel like this is a different way of reaching the audience that needs to be reached.
Yeah. Different form of resistance, hey? Yeah.
Yeah. So this
Yeah.
is my own personal way of
Mhm.
resisting, but I'm
Yeah.
doing all right. I have a badass therapist. You've probably
Love
heard of
that.
her, Dr. Maureen Winnell.
Yes. She's pretty famous in our neck of the woods in terms of religious trauma. So,
So I work with her, so she's
yeah,
keeping me grounded. And yeah, for
amazing.
those who don't know, she coined the term
Mm.
religious trauma syndrome.
Yes.
Uh, I'm glad to hear that she's famous. She needs to
Yeah,
be.
well, I mean, in the therapist world, in terms of religious trauma, it's a pretty not super well-known space. It's not spoken about a whole lot. And I think Marlene's book, Leaving the Fold, was probably one of the first real pieces of literature that sort of spoke about this type of trauma. And so, yeah, I mean, in the terms of like religious trauma therapist world, we she's famous to us anyway.
Yeah.
So, yes. Okay, I
Yep.
like to start these episodes with a super broad, vague question, and I do that so that it's very intentional anyway. So I like to see where it goes. So where does your story start?
Oh my goodness. I guess when I was born.
Hmm.
So I was born Mormon, and I was born as a fifth generation Mormon on my mom's side, in Texas, and my dad is a convert.
Mm,
So fifth generation from my mom's side, and then convert, but both my parents were Mormon, they still are.
mm,
And I was raised in the church in this podunk little town,
yeah.
middle of nowhere. It's pretty isolated, and I was told that it was the truth, the one and only truth. And when you're a child growing up and you're told that the sky is blue, you believe that the sky is blue, right? Because all
Mm,
the adults in life, and it's not just my parents who were saying this, it was my whole community,
mm,
you know. And I didn't really I compare the community I grew up in as like being one step away from having a wall around it.
yeah.
We didn't have a wall, but we didn't really interact with non-members unless we were trying to convert them.
Mm.
So, and that was a pretty quick way to lose friends. You know?
Yeah, it also is it's not a great way to make friends either. And I mean, I know that as a Mormon, you are not supposed to make friends with non-Mormons anyway, but um
Unless you're trying to convert them.
yes, exactly. Yeah. I mean, what was that like for like the little version of yourself, just like wanting to be a kid but not being able to in a normal development way? Like, what was it like for you?
It was tough. I remember being pretty young. I was homeschooled for a bit too, because my parents were afraid that public school was going to corrupt us if we were exposed to the world. But we had a homeschool group, but we were the only Mormons that were part of this group. And I
Mm,
remember making friends with this other little girl who was Baptist, and I was pretty young. I want to say I was like 8 or 9, and like feeling like I wasn't supposed to really be friends with her because she wasn't Mormon. But
mm.
I was still able to go hang out with her at her house. But then I shared the gospel with her and then was never invited back. And so I was pretty lonely. I was a very, very lonely child.
Yeah.
We didn't have neighbors within walking distance. And yeah, I was bored a lot. And
Mm, yeah. What were you taught about the world? Because I mean, most of the time, well, now at the moment, I guess not all the time, but at the moment, there is obviously a lot of conversation around like the Mormon church being a cult or at least displaying cult-like dynamics and things like that. So, what were you taught about the world?
um, so I want to respond to that really fast. Dr. Marlene Winnell's definition of a cult is mind control.
Mhm.
So I would say that the Mormon Church is 100% a cult.
Yeah, I would agree. I was probably being palatable there for a moment.
I know a lot of people don't want to hear that. They want to think that a
Yeah.
cult is this weird little community that has like maybe 200 people and they're out in the middle of nowhere. And no one wants to think that a cult could be as big as the Mormon Church,
Yeah.
on a global scale. But what I was taught about the world was that it was evil and wicked and dangerous, and I don't need to venture outside of my Mormon community or I'll get eaten alive and destroyed. And so, yeah, it was a lot of fear about going out into the world.
Mm. Yeah. How did that impact, I guess, just like your view of yourself and who you thought you were growing up, and particularly sort of going into, I guess, teenage years in that sort of identity forming period about who you were?
Um, so oh goodness, that's a loaded question. I 100% believed the church. I
Mm.
thought it really was, I know some people grow up and they're like, they never buy it from day one, but I bought into it. And so I thought that I was really lucky to be born into the true church, the one and only true church. And I thought that I had been like, we were told that we were like one of the most valiant spirits up in heaven, that there had been a war in heaven, and the people who were born into the church in the last days, because they think this is the last days before the apocalypse. Um, we fought the hardest and we were the most obedient to God and everything. Um, and so I thought that's like who I was. If you'd asked me back then, who are you? I would have said I'm Mormon. Like
Yeah.
that was my identity, and everything else was kind of secondary
Mm.
to being a Mormon. And then as I started getting into teenage years, I was not taught anything about my body developing.
Mm.
Um, like when my period started, I didn't know what was happening,
Yeah.
and I was scared. And for some reason, I thought I was going to get in trouble.
Yeah.
And I went like this whole day of like not saying anything and just having to change clothes all day, like every hour.
Yeah.
And then I finally asked, like, what's going on? And then as I started having sexual urges,
Mm.
I really thought that something was very, very wrong with me. And I was absolutely terrified. I thought I was some kind of weird pervert. I was some kind of freak. And so the only sex ed that I had was don't have sex before marriage.
Yeah.
I'm like, that was it.
Yeah.
But I didn't even know what sex was. I
Yeah.
knew it was something that you do without clothes, but like I didn't understand the logistics of it.
Yeah.
And um so and then they would talk about, don't watch pornography.
Mhm.
Pornography is a sin. They would say that sexual sin is a sin next to murder, of
Mm.
like that's how serious it is. So if you have sex outside of marriage, then you're one step away from a murderer.
Mhm.
So I guess if you have sex before your wedding night, one day before you get married, you're a sinner. But if it's one day after, then you're fine.
Yeah.
Doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And so I wasn't doing any of that, but I would have impure thoughts,
Mm.
which I now know are just normal, healthy teenager thoughts.
Yeah.
And I, yeah, I really thought that I was going to hell, and I would, or the Mormon version of hell. They kind of have their own little words. They call it like the, what is it? Celestial kingdom
Mhm.
and darkness. And so they believe in hell, but their own version of it. But
Yeah.
I say it just for context because Mormons get very wordy and I get tired of using their stupid lingo.
Yeah. Yes, it's a different kind of language and it's all like the same thing, but it's just different words. Which again, like is like if you read Stephen Hassan's book around cult mind control is also an aspect of that. But in terms of like creating your own language, specific to your beliefs. So, I want to get into the conversation around purity culture, but I want to ask something before because I really like to ask this quite early on, which is growing up in this space as a young person, who was God to you?
God was like, so he was my heavenly father,
Hmm.
like a parent figure. So Mormons believe that God and Jesus and the Holy Ghost are three separate beings.
Hmm.
So Jesus was like my brother. So the Mormons worship all three of them, Heavenly Father, Jesus, and the Holy Ghost. And so Heavenly Father was like at the top, but then Jesus is like right next to him.
Hmm.
And then there's the Holy Ghost who like whispers to you or something. It's kind of confusing. And yeah, he was like my best friend.
Yeah.
Um, might get a little emotional here.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I would pray. So we would pray to Heavenly Father, but then it was like Heavenly Father could also talk to Jesus for us, or we could talk to Jesus. And so, anytime I had an issue with anything,
Mm.
the go-to person that I would talk to was God.
Yeah.
You know, I thought it was a very one-sided conversation. He never actually answered back.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's one of the biggest pain points for a lot of people with religious trauma that doesn't get talked about is actually grieving that relationship with whatever divine figure it is based on whatever religion you've come from. But if at the time, and I know for myself and for a lot of the people that I've connected with and that have been on this podcast, that relationship with the divine was very deeply personal and important. And there is grief around that when you lose that or when you realize that perhaps maybe that wasn't what you originally thought it was. So yeah, it's which I mean that's part of the reason why I like to ask it at the beginning because usually there is a trajectory and that relationship changes or dissolves perhaps. And so yeah, but it
I'm
can
glad you pointed that out, because something that was frustrating for me after I left was how a lot of people didn't understand why I was sad. And they were like, well, if you're sad, why don't you go back? And it's like, well, it's not that simple,
yeah,
And or they would be like, why can't you be happy that you're out? Like you're free now. And they don't understand that there's a grieving process that you go through when you're a true
mm,
believer like that. It
yeah,
is like losing a friend. And then on top of it, I I not only lost my imaginary friends, I
yeah,
lost my whole Mormon community too.
yeah, yeah. Okay. I mean, I feel like we're alluding to future things, which is good. I love using like random biblical terms in non-biblical ways of like we're foreshadowing things that are going to happen. But I want to talk more about what purity culture was like for you growing up because I know that that's a big aspect of what you have sort of flipped on its head and learned to reclaim for yourself, which I love. Um, but I think that there is this, and I've done a few episodes on purity culture, so people sort of know now, but there is this really like unrealistic and unhelpful notion that purity culture is just don't have sex before you get married, but it's so much bigger than that. And is just like deeply rooted in shame and patriarchy and control of women's bodies. And so I'm curious what that was like for you as a young woman growing up.
It was very controlling. Where do I even start? Yeah, the no sex before marriage, but it was also no thoughts of sex
Mm.
before marriage.
Yeah.
So they would have a lot of church lessons about controlling your impure thoughts, and even having an impure thought is a sin. And by impure thought, they just mean again healthy bodily urges.
Yeah. Yeah.
um so if you look at a cute guy or a cute girl and you're like, oh hey, then that's you sinning,
Yeah.
which is such a contradiction because you're supposed to get married as soon as possible, but don't have any of these impure thoughts, so
Yeah, it's a lose-lose situation for you.
so I was really scared of myself. I was scared of my own brain. I was terrified of my own body. It seemed like you were just kind of given this body to be a temptation zone. It's just constantly trying to tempt you. You're not supposed to touch it. You're not supposed to look at it. You're
Mm.
not supposed to have any feelings whatsoever. You just kind of stay up here in your brain and you ignore the rest of this. But even your brain isn't really a safe zone because it might start thinking. And I'm a very creative and imaginative person. So I have a really vivid imagination. And so I
Yeah.
was really scared of these images in my head. And I would pray and, try to repent. And they taught us that it was an addiction.
Right.
And, you know, what's frustrating is some people genuinely have a sex addiction. And I think it gets to that point whenever it becomes harmful to your life. You're not doing anything else. You're missing work. You're not paying your bills. You're not socializing because you're just
Mm.
doing this one thing. And that could be anything. That happens with gambling. That happens with meditating. Some people get addicted to meditating, but they were taking a healthy behavior and saying that it's this addiction and you need addiction recovery. Um, so yeah, and it just made me really scared of myself and
Mm.
not able to trust myself. And then we were also, it's not just the don't have sex, it's you're supposed to be very modest. So like the way you dress and the way you wear your hair. We weren't allowed to have double ear piercings. We weren't allowed to have nose piercing. I have a little nose piercing
Mm-hmm.
now. You can see it, but I'm
Love
very
it.
proud of it. No tattoos, and even having like black nails was a little like, oh,
Mm.
that's too loud. We weren't allowed to show our shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
We joke and call it porn shoulders.
Oh my goodness.
But I mean, it wasn't even a joke because it's like
Yeah.
you're supposed to show your shoulders. You can't show your midriff, no cleavage, no short shorts. And then we would be told if you are showing those things, you turn into porn for the boys and it's going to lead them into temptation and they're going to sin and it's going to be your fault.
Mm-hmm.
But, they never said what if the boys dress immodestly and because they assume that girls don't masturbate.
Mm-hmm. Well, the
What
girls just don't have desire in general, like
yeah.
sexual desire. Like you are just a vessel for male desire.
Mhm. So I was really confused and no one was talking to me about this.
Mm.
And I didn't even know the word masturbate until I was 17. And it was from a Mormon therapist who I was talking to because I was so scared of what was going on. And I wanted to find out, like, is what I'm doing sinning
Yeah.
or is this okay? Because I wasn't having sex, I wasn't watching porn. And it was like once every 2 weeks. It wasn't even and she said, because I talked to the bishop first. Sorry, I'm kind of all over the
Oh,
place
that's
and
okay.
too much, then I can stop. But I told the bishop first because we were told to, if we had anything that we were concerned about, to just go talk to the bishop. And
Mm.
so I went and I asked the bishop, like, is this a sin? Is it not? And I got really lucky that he was a really good guy. He actually ended up leaving the church shortly thereafter. And I think it's
Oh.
because he had heard all of these stories from the youth. But the Mormon church has had a big problem and they're getting sued
Mm.
because a lot of the men that were put into the leadership positions were not good people.
Mm.
And they didn't do background checks or anything like that. And you're told to just go in there as a minor in this room alone with this old man and tell him about what you're doing in your alone time.
Yeah.
It's a disgusting practice. It's absolutely disgusting. And then they want to sit there on their moral high horse. So I had talked to the bishop, and then he said he didn't feel qualified and that I needed to go talk to this female therapist, which good for him.
Mm-hmm.
And how I found out the word masturbate was from her saying, the bishop told me you've been, and she like lowered her voice, masturbating. And I said, what is that?
Like
And
we need to whisper it.
she goes, how can you be doing it if you don't know what it is? And that just shows her level of sex ed.
Yeah.
How can you be doing this if you don't know what it is? And I was like, why don't you tell me? And then I'll tell you if I'm doing it or not.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
And then she lowers her voice again. It's arousing yourself sexually. And I just felt like this like stone like dropped into my stomach. And I
Mm.
felt like the scum of the earth. And I felt like I was going to Mormon hell
Mm.
and I was some kind of weird pervert and I couldn't,
Yeah.
so I get flustered talking about
Yeah,
that.
I mean it just like is the perfect example of how shame-based purity culture is in terms of it's not that you even like did something wrong in air quotes, but that you became wrong somehow. Like you are wrong now. It's like I guess that shift between guilt and shame. And purity culture has both aspects, but typically when we, quote unquote, do something wrong in their eyes, it's not about the action. It's just now you are a really shit human, which messes people up.
Yeah, it did. It messed me up a lot. And I had really severe depression and anxiety all through my teenage years. And I was going to therapy and they couldn't figure me out.
Yeah,
They kept passing me along to the next therapist because they'd be like, you're too complicated. I can't figure you out. Go see so and so.
yeah.
And because they didn't understand the religion side of things. And yeah, I was really messed up as a teen and I
Were
was
you going
self-harming.
from were you going from Mormon therapist to Mormon therapist?
I was at first, and then I
Yeah.
think my parents got kind of frustrated with the Mormon therapists because we had to go really far out of our way to see them. We had to drive like 2 hours one way sometimes
Oh,
to go see
wow.
specific Mormon therapists to just have them be like, we don't know what's happening with you. You should be good.
Mm,
So then they started taking me to secular therapists who would hear your parents are still together. You've lived in the
mm.
same house your whole life. You go to church every Sunday. What's the issue?
Yeah. Yeah. It's really, even now, I still unfortunately have people land in my room or in like my office who just have been hurt by practitioners and therapists and things like that because there is just this really harmful and unhelpful notion that, oh, well, like religion is good, like it's comforting, it's a really beautiful, and yes, it can be all of those things, but it can also be incredibly harmful for people. And therapists are not always great at being able to understand that actually maybe this thing or this system that you have been raised in is actually the problem in terms of why you are feeling and experiencing a lot of what you're experiencing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Um, what was it like to be continually dismissed and unheard and just probably, I suspect, made to be the problem during that period of time?
You just validated me so much. It was so frustrating.
Yeah.
It was so frustrating and it was confusing and it kept feeling like it was being turned around on me that I was just being a spoiled brat
Mm,
and there was nothing wrong with me and I would have pills thrown at me and they would work for, like 6 months or a year and then they would stop working because when you're in an environment like that, it doesn't matter what magical pills you're being given.
mm,
You're still going to church every Sunday. And when I was in high school, it was church every day, first thing in the morning, sometimes 2 or 3 times a day. It's just church, just constantly. So when you're getting this regular poisonous dose,
hmm.
it doesn't matter what antidepressants you're taking. And so, yeah, it felt like I was just I was the problem. I was just being a brat. I was being dramatic. I needed to suck it up. I
Yeah.
needed to be grateful for what I had.
Yeah. I mean, and that's heartbreaking for anybody to be going through, but particularly for a teenager to be going through and not just like not understanding anything other than the little bubble of the world that you were in is heartbreaking. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. That's why I'm so like passionate about
Mm.
this subject and raising awareness about it now, because
Yeah.
so many people don't understand
Mm.
how harmful religion is.
Yeah, absolutely. How long were you a part of the Mormon church?
Until I was 26, so
Okay.
26 years.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm thinking, like, from my knowledge, 26, in typical Mormon fashion, you should have been married with at least a baby or some on the way, I imagine. And I'm assuming that trajectory didn't happen. So what was that like? Because you're not only not doing what you were supposed to be doing, um, but yeah, like, what was that period of time like?
I feel like I need some tequila for this. Uh, I'll have some afterwards. I'll be fine. I did get married,
Oh, right.
but I did not have babies, and I am so, so, so grateful
Yeah.
that humans are okay with birth control. So yeah, there was an older guy who was a coworker of mine. I was working at a horse stables at the time, like dream job, working with horses. And he was not a Mormon. And I was so naive. I met him when I was 19. And my parents had not wanted me to move off and get my own apartment and get a job. They wanted me to stay in that little community and
Mhm.
find something there. And
The bubble.
probably my third cousins, honestly.
Stay in the bubble.
Stay in the little bubble and get married and
Yes.
have babies. And
Mm.
but that's not what I wanted. I actually wanted to be a world famous author, and so
Oh,
I don't know why I had to move to uh to do that, but
yeah.
I didn't want that. I was pretty independent, and so I had my own apartment, and I got a job and
Mm.
was working there, and this older coworker just started hitting on me, and I didn't understand boundaries and consent and how to set them. And I was pretty lonely, and he was like, "You want to be friends?"
Mm.
And I thought friends actually meant friends.
Yeah.
And then he started putting moves on me, and I'll be honest, I'd never been kissed, and I was pretty bummed about that, and I wanted to be kissed, and it was not a very good kiss. It was pretty gross, actually.
Oh.
I would say no, I don't want this, and he would do things anyway, and then it kind of escalated, and um I told him I didn't want to see him anymore. And this is the type of guy he was. He would show up at my apartment late at night crying and saying that if he didn't get to see me, he was going to kill himself.
Right.
And my Mormon training would kick in of you're responsible for saving everyone. There were all these lessons of like, if someone was having a bad day and they were going to kill themselves and you didn't do something to change their day, then that's on you. So,
Yeah.
so much pressure to save everyone, to always be giving, to always be generous, to, give the shirt off your back kind of thing. And so that would kick in. Not only did I not have skills to stand up for myself, I had this
Mm.
training, this grooming of you have to save everyone and always be nice and everything. So it
Yeah.
was just a disaster. It was
Yeah.
a total disaster. And I ended up marrying him because I was like, we can't have sex until marriage, and
Mhm.
I can only marry a Mormon. And he's like, well, I'll join the church, I'll marry you.
Right. Okay.
And what's so funny is everyone hated him.
Yeah.
And, like everyone was clued in that he was a predator. And I remember my brother-in-law actually saying he's a predator. And here's how you find out if he's not: invite him to church.
Mm.
And if he's not a predator, then he'll go to church. If he is, then he won't. And
Sorry.
you don't apologize.
Sorry,
It's
my
just
reaction to that probably says screams everything, which is that that's the most ironic thing ever.
right.
Oh.
And that's just what everyone believed, that like somehow going to church is like the standard. Like there's you can't possibly enter, there's like some kind of force field or something. If you're a bad person, you can't go into the church.
Hmm. Yeah, it's like that. I grew up with my dad used to say things like he was not a person of faith, and that if he walked into a church, it would cave in, right? Like it's like that sort of mentality. But
Yeah,
the
me
fact
too.
that like they think that churches are like predator repellent is just the most insane and ironic thing I've heard. But also, what you're explaining is so common when you are not just not taught about boundaries, you are actively taught against them almost, like excessive vulnerability, boundaryless relationships. So, of course, it's like a natural course of progression for you to easily be taken advantage of by somebody dangerous. And I think people don't particularly realize just how easy it is for people to fall into harmful and potentially really dangerous relationships after even just like stepping outside of the bubble. You might be still a part of the church, but you're outside of that little bubble.
Hmm.
Yeah.
It is. And of course, all of that was my fault too. And I kept being
Hmm.
taught how I needed to stop seeing this guy. I wasn't seeing him. He was seeing me. And
Yeah.
no backup, no skills. It's not like the priesthood brethren came over to my apartment and defended me when he was showing up, like
Yeah.
absolutely zero, no bouncers. Like
Hmm.
where's the bouncers for this guy,
Yeah.
just you take care of it all on your own.
Hmm.
And and I didn't understand what was happening when he was doing things that I didn't want. And even though I was saying no and he was doing them anyway, I didn't register what that was.
Yeah.
And I interpreted that as me committing a sin and me giving in to temptation.
Yeah. So you did get married, but you didn't really do it the typical Mormon way. So I'm
No.
curious what that looked like in terms of like your relationship with your parents and your family and like did they obviously it sounds like they didn't approve of that relationship or that marriage. Did you get temple married?
No, I actually really wanted to serve a mission, and
Oh.
then you have to go through the temple interview.
Mm,
And when they got to the do you obey the law of chastity, which is the
mm,
um are you sexually pure, I admitted, because I'm truthful and honest, this is embarrassing, but it
mm.
needs to be told. I admitted that I masturbated, and
Yeah.
they said I was unworthy. And so that's when I was like, and their solution to fixing that is go get married. If you're being sexually impure, then you got to go get married. So I wasn't worthy of the temple. And
Mm.
then he, of course, wasn't either.
Yeah.
And he had joined the church, but you have to be a member for at least a year, and then you have to check all their little boxes to
Mm.
be temple worthy. So no, we ended God, sorry, flashback. We actually ended up getting married in a Unitarian church because,
Oh.
yeah, I was in Texas. Long story short, we were going to get married at a friend's house. I'm kind of glad that we didn't, because it would have been humiliating. And then, like a week before our wedding, a hurricane came through. So we evacuated, and I took my wedding dress with me. And I was like, you know what? I just kind of want to get this over with. And then the Mormon church out there that we evacuated to wouldn't marry us. I
Right.
don't remember why. They like needed approval from my bishop or something. And it's like, well, I don't know where he is right now. Like we evacuated from a hurricane. Um and so then we found a Unitarian church and they're like, yeah, we'll marry you. So it was
Right.
a hurricane wedding and the marriage went about as smoothly as that.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you look back on that now and the marriage? And I mean, anytime I feel like marriage and we better get this over and done with is in the same sentence, it's probably not ideal for our sense of self. But I'm curious how you look back on that now.
I'm so glad I got divorced.
Yeah.
That's how I feel about it. I'm so glad that divorce is legal and that women are allowed to initiate divorce. Because it wasn't in the States, it wasn't until like 1970 something
Mm,
that women were allowed to initiate divorce.
yeah.
Um, Ridiculous like that. Um,
Were you still a part of the church when you got divorced?
no, I left the church and then I got divorced
Right.
like a year later,
Hmm.
or I initiated the divorce a year later. It took a year or two for the thing to go through.
Yeah, typically takes its sweet ass time. Um, but okay, so I'm curious what was the final straw in terms of, and I say that because like obviously I know it's typically a very long process for people to leave the whatever faith or religion they were raised in. But what was that leaving process like for you?
So I was married and I was living with horrible human.
Mm,
I will say this though, because he wasn't a super Mormon guy, I was able to be more myself and explore things that I wouldn't have been able to do
mm,
if he had been a super Mormon guy.
mm-hmm.
Uh, so, in a weird way, that helped me kind of break out. And and he would say things sometimes after, and I don't want to give him credit for me leaving, but
Yeah.
I was coming home from church one time and he was like, why do they keep bringing up the natural man? I keep hearing the natural man as an enemy to God, but like, what's wrong with nature? Like, I am the natural man. Like, wait, why is nature bad?
Yeah.
And I didn't really have an explanation, and just things that people would say would add up, and like they would ask, why can't Mormons drink tea
Mm,
and they chug soda, but they can't have tea.
yeah.
And just things started to not add up. And then I was I was super depressed and I was looking for something to help with my depression. And I was studying hypnosis because I
Hmm.
heard that it could help. And I was sitting in church one day and I realized that they were hypnotizing us with a really horrible message.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, no wonder I'm so depressed. And then I think a really big thing of it too was actually just studying the religion itself, because they tell you that the scriptures have all the answers.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was reading the scriptures looking for all the answers, and I just noticed that like it didn't make sense.
Hmm.
Really bad writing.
Yeah.
On page 1, they're saying this, and on page 5, they're saying this, and they
Hmm.
contradict. And I would ask for clarification, and I would be told it's just an obedience thing. I'm like, what kind of answer is that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And also, Joseph Smith seems kind of like a bit of a dick. So, like, especially when you start, like, I remember when I was like, I was not a part of the Mormon church, but we would have Mormon missionaries obviously come to your door and things like that. And I was this obnoxious Christian who thought that she knew best as a early 20-year-old, obviously. And I'd be like, yeah, come on in, like, and would love debating the poor Mormon missionary guys. And I was like, like this is insane. Like I believe some weird, and I look back and I go, I believe some weird shit, but like this is a lot. And so I every ex-Mormon that I talk to is always like, as soon as I started actually reading what they were teaching, it just crumbled.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, my parents, when I was a teenager, took us to this place called Nauvoo, which is like where the Mormon church started.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, we toured all of these old buildings and heard all these stories about church history. And that was actually kind of a crack in my testimony.
Yeah.
It backfired. They were trying to get us more in the church, and then I learned more about it. And yeah, I had the missionaries knock on my door the other day. And so I told them, read your scriptures.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Do what they tell you to do. Read your scriptures and really listen to them. Don't just cherry pick them, you know. Don't just read a verse every day. Like actually read the whole book.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it doesn't make sense.
What was it like when that started to crumble though? Because like it was all you had been raised with, it was all you knew. So it's still like a crumbling of your upbringing and your foundation. And so what was that like for you?
It was scary. And it was overwhelming, and I didn't want to let go of it. Um, and my brother had left a few years prior, and he and I would be having conversations. And he saw me come home from church one day, and I was having a panic attack. And he was like, "Are you okay?" You know? And I
Yeah.
was like, "Oh, this is just what happens every Sunday after church." And he's like, "Well, maybe if that's happening, maybe it's a sign that this isn't a good thing." So I decided I was going to take a break from it, but I remember saying like, I'm going to take a break, but I still believe it. I still think it's true. And he was just like, come on, like, look at it. It's not making sense. It's not true. Like,
Yeah.
you just got to bite the bullet and just accept that it's not true. And it was just really, really overwhelming. I was pretty dysfunctional,
Mm.
even more dysfunctional than I already had been for a few years, because I didn't know anything about the world. You
Mm.
know, I remember going to my first bar, and they asked me what I wanted to drink, and I said, one alcohol, please.
Oh,
You know, and she goes, okay, what kind? This poor bartender probably thought that I was being such a bitch. And I go, oh, there's different kinds.
oh,
So, I mean, that's just one example, but there were just so many things that it,
yeah,
it literally was like stepping into another universe.
yeah.
And my whole universe view shattered. And it felt like my whole reality had shattered and turned upside down. And I was really confused. I didn't know who I was anymore. And then I was getting divorced shortly after. And so changing my name back to my maiden name. So I
Mm.
didn't even know what my name was. And I was just having even more panic attacks because it was just, who am I? You
Mm.
know, because I wasn't Mormon anymore. So who is
Yeah,
Elayna?
when you're like when your whole identity is rooted in that, it's like an existential identity crisis that someone is going through. It can be terrifying at that time. So, what,
It was an
yeah,
existential identity crisis.
yeah. What was it like for you to unlearn? And this is obviously like I'm moving in the direction of where you are now, but what was it like for you to start to unlearn all of the crap in that you were taught around purity culture and to start owning your own body again?
It was very liberating. I'd
Yeah,
say it was really liberating, like learning that these urges and these impure thoughts that I'd had were actually normal
yeah,
was so freeing to just finally like accept myself of like, oh, I'm not a freak. There's nothing wrong with me. I'm just actually a healthy human.
yeah.
And just finding out that my body is like an amusement park instead
Mm,
of this temptation zone. And like, and with learning about your body and things like that, you come across learning about boundaries and consent.
Hmm.
And it was like, oh, no shit. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It wasn't me. It wasn't me giving in to temptation. It was someone not taking no for an answer because he was a horrible person.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of like taking a breath of fresh air, you know.
Mm. Did it feel liberating straight away?
Um, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was still kind of scary because there's always that kind of back of the mind, like, what if they're right
Mm.
thing? But then I just have to do the self-talk again of like,
Yeah.
well, they believe in talking snakes, so they're not.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so there is reclaiming your body post purity culture and learning that all of that is not evil and abnormal and impure. And, I talk about purity culture in that it can cause actual trauma for us and it changes our makeup and our nervous system and all of that. And then there is reclaiming purity culture and becoming a stripper. And so I gotta know how that happened.
Yes. What gave it away?
Yeah, I know.
So this was 2012, and I still remember January 1st, 2012 was the day I decided to stop going to church.
Mm.
And then, I was on my break that kind of just turned into I'm still on break.
Hmm.
Um, and then I needed a job, and I'll give a little bit of backstory of like, because everyone wants to know like why stripper? Why did you go to
Yeah.
big? So I told you about the job that I'd worked at with the horses, where my coworker, who at the time was my husband, was not leaving me alone, and I would during that time I had talked to my sister, and her response was, "Well, stop wearing tank tops," because I was
Oh.
in Texas on the beach in the summertime working outside, and I would wear tank tops, and so his behavior was my fault for showing my shoulders.
Yeah, the whole what were you wearing
Yeah.
situation. Yeah.
And then I'd worked at just several different jobs. I'd worked at Home Depot for a while and would get a lot of harassment from the contractors there. Um, and then I'd actually worked as a machinist and got dealt with a lot of misogyny there. Found out my male coworkers were making twice as much as me, even though I was training them. It just, and then the job that I had before I was a stripper, I'd actually gotten through the church. They had a job placement program, and I was a caretaker for this autistic boy. And I was going out to this family's house. That was another Mormon family, and taking care of this boy. And the boy was great. He was sweet. The dad of the boy, however, was not a great guy, and a very similar marriage as the one that I was in. He was a lot older than her, and he would make really inappropriate comments to me and was just being creepy. And um, he grabbed my butt one day while I was in the kitchen,
Yeah.
and I was just like, I'm not okay with this. And I was talking to another member, and she's like, wait, you're working where? That guy's a registered sex offender.
Oh, shit.
So the church had sent me to work in a home of a registered sex offender and did not tell me, and legally didn't have to tell me because I was over 18. I was like 23 or 24 at the time. Um, and then I still tried to work with that. I was like, I'll still work as long as he's not in the house. But then he would, of course, come home, and I was
Mm.
just like, I can't do this, and I quit and went back to the church. I was still Mormon at that time,
Mm.
looking for another job, and they had actually dissolved their job program because they didn't want to get in trouble.
Oh my goodness.
So I think it was like 6 months after that, I quit going to church and I needed a job. And I was so fed up. And I was not Mormon anymore. And being a stripper was the thing that I said I would never, ever do. I was one of those people like, oh, look at those girls. Meh, meh, meh.
Yep.
And I remember sitting on the couch one day and like, well, I heard that strippers can make good money. I
Mm,
wonder if I could do that. That's an option now.
yeah.
I was just like at this fuck it point with the harassment. And I was like, if I'm going to get treated this way anyway, I want to turn it on its head and I'm going to make money for it.
Yep. And ironically, I suspect you probably have far more control over around it anyway in that
I
space.
do.
Yeah.
And yeah, I do. And there's bouncers there to back me up if something happens. And I get to say the rules up front of like, no means no. This is what you can do. This is what you can't do.
Yeah.
And I am in control, and that's where I learned how to stand up for myself, and I got some backbone, and that's where I learned about boundaries and consent, and that's what opened my eyes to the man I was married to, because I noticed pretty quickly there's two types of guys who go into the club. There's the guys who take no for an answer,
Mhm.
and the guys who don't take no for an answer,
Yeah.
and the guys who don't take no for an answer get thrown out really quickly.
Mm, yeah.
And then I was just like, oh my God, I'm married to a creeper.
That's probably a really generous word, it sounds like, based on everything you've said. It sounds like a very palatable word. Uh, I'm curious what if and if you remember what your first dance was like and how you felt.
I remember it very clearly.
Yeah.
So my first time ever in the strip club, I love telling this story, by the way, um, was when I became a stripper. I actually just went in for information and they were like, well, you're cute. You can work tonight. It was a Friday the 13th. It was a full moon and my period had started.
Oh, triple
You can't
whammy.
make this up. And so I was like, okay. And I didn't even touch the pole because I was scared of it. So I just kind of went out there and like did this.
Shimmy.
I had some people tip me and be like, I can tell you're new, but keep
Yeah.
at it. And then someone asked me for a lap dance, and I didn't know what that was. I honestly thought it was something that you did with your hands, like patty cake. I had no clue. And so I just like put my hands on either side of him and I went like this the whole song. And he was pretty mad.
Oh my
And
God.
then another stripper took pity on me and she's like, okay, come here. You can watch me do a dance. I'm gonna dance for this guy and you can watch, and then I'm gonna dance for you.
Mm,
And it's like, oh, that's why it's a lap dance.
right. Okay. Yeah. Oh, how do you feel thinking back on it now? Like, is it just funny? Is it like, does it reinforce just how, naive you were raised to be and trained to be?
Yeah, I think it's both of those.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty funny.
Yeah.
But it is also kind of sad when I think about it,
Mm,
honestly, that I was just so naive still
mm,
around sex and anything sexy. And even though I'd been married for
mm.
a few years and I was 26 at that time, and yeah, it just was like, wow, I was so naive.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, and I sort of put a caveat on the back of that, which is like, yes, naive, but you were also conditioned to be that naive. And so, and I put that there because like, it's not just you just being naive. And I think we often see that again as like, it's that person's fault, but you were conditioned to be that naive and that sheltered. So yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
you're absolutely right there. That's something I still have to catch myself with, is trying to not always blame myself for everything.
yeah. Yeah. I'm wondering if, I mean, obviously, this is probably like my therapist self nerding out here for a second, which is like, was there a moment where like you're dancing and you cognitively know that this is okay, but like our body sometimes doesn't match that, and our body can still feel fear and anxiety. And so I'm going like cognitively, you might have known that this was okay and normal and safe and good. But did it take a while for your body to catch up to that?
I think I'm still catching up to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah, yeah. There's times that I feel really empowered, and
Mm.
then there's other times that I'm like, I'm naked up here.
Yeah.
And it's, yeah, there's still, I've noticed if I get really tired or I'm really stressed out or something, I start to get those old shame and guilt
Mm.
patterns coming through, and I'll have to take a break and go cry and do the self-talk again of like, not doing anything wrong. This is in front of consenting adults,
Yeah.
you know, who are paying me, who are wanting this, enthusiastically wanting this, and
Yeah.
this is just some purity culture bullshit that's, ingrained in me that's
Mm.
making me feel this shame. And
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like I've got a double-barreled question, but I will ask it in two phases, which is, how do your family feel about the fact that you are a stripper, and how has that shifted and changed your relationship with them?
so this is their fault for teaching me to always be honest. I When I first got my job, I was living in Texas and I was renting a house from my parents. So I wasn't living under their roof, but it was a house. It had been my grandmother's house and they were renting it out. And so I was renting from them.
Mm.
And I tried to lie about what my job was, and then I couldn't do it. And I told them honestly what I was doing because I felt bad about lying. And then they said I couldn't rent the house anymore. So they took my housing away. And then in Texas, I kept trying to find a house, and every time I would drop what my legal job was,
Mm.
the room would just go cold and silent, and I couldn't find housing. And so I moved across the country
Yeah.
to known as the stripper capital of the US. There's like more strip clubs per capita than anywhere else in the country, and it might be anywhere else in the world. Uh,
Wow.
and I thought I can probably find housing there.
You would hope, fingers crossed. Yeah.
So I did. And so that was very painful.
Yeah.
Um, and uh, they didn't talk to me for a while, and I didn't talk to them. And then we kind of started talking again. And then I tried to stop contact with them a couple years ago, but then they kept pushing to talk to me, and um, I, they're at least not super pushy with the religion. But it's just really painful to talk to someone and have a polite chit chat about pets and the weather with people who put me in danger, who
Yeah.
took my housing away, who, it's not like I want to talk to them about my job. I don't. I'm not going to lie about what I do.
Yeah.
Um, and I know how they think.
Mm.
I think that they think I forgot the teachings of the church. They don't realize that no, I went harder.
Yeah.
I learned more about it. So I know how they think. I know they think that I'm going to Mormon hell. And it's just very painful and draining to have a chat of like, oh, wasn't the weather weird today? Wasn't the weather nice? With people who think I'm evil.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's been very, very strained.
Yeah. Yeah. You alluded to, I guess, the second part of what that question was going to be, which is how do you personally deal with, I guess, the stigma and the hate against any form of sex work, right? And navigating that the reality is that in some situations it is incredibly unethical and dangerous, and being able to have that nuance, but also just deal with the stigma for anybody who works in this space or adjacent to this space.
Um, I try to just be open about what I do, and which is I feel like I'm very open online with what I do, but I haven't told my neighbors. And
I don't know my neighbors either.
I don't know them very well, and I don't really want them in my business. And it's always kind of scary whenever I meet a new friend and, I'm trying to get to know somebody, and then I drop that bomb on them. And
Yeah.
um yeah, there's definitely still a really big stigma about it. So I just keep speaking my truth. There's a lot of Captain Save-A-Hose out there. That's what we call
Never heard that terminology and I love it.
that. They just think that we're too stupid or naive. Like, I get why they think that we're naive, because I was very naive. But I've learned a lot from being in this industry, and this is the industry that taught me to stand up for myself. And
Yeah.
I chose to do it. I think I think a lot of people think that we've been coerced or forced or somehow to be in this, and or there's nothing else that we can do. And sex trafficking is horrible.
Yep.
Labor trafficking, period, is horrible and shouldn't happen. You should not be forced to work in a warehouse if you don't want to work in a warehouse. Um, and so I just keep trying to raise awareness of, like, some people actually want to do this.
Yeah.
We do have other options. I do enjoy my job. And how
Mm.
many people out there can you just go out onto the street and ask people, do you enjoy what you do for a living? I would say
Mhm.
that probably 80% of people would say no.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty lucky to be in something that I, for the most part, most of the time, do really enjoy.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, you used an analogy there in terms of like when you're talking to people and like you're having to like drop the bomb. And my first reaction was like the fact that that even is like considered dropping a bomb is insane to me. But I know why. And it's insane to me because I'm like, there are literal bombs being dropped in places. Like, can we just like get over the fact that like you are choosing to take your clothes off for a living? Like there are far worse things in the world at the moment than like consensually choosing whatever fucking career path you want to do, right? Um,
Yeah,
but it just do you find that it impacts the way that you form friendships and make relationships and that sort of thing?
it definitely does. When I first started doing this, I was very open about it
Yeah.
because I didn't want to be feeling shame about it. I didn't want to be contributing to the stigma. And I got just so many bad reactions. And now I'm a little more reserved on
Yeah.
opening up about that. And I do find that I kind of hold myself back from going out and meeting people outside of the sex industry, outside of my little bubble now.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Bubble, just because it's exhausting. It's exhausting to get to know somebody and then to just say what I do for work, and then their energy changes like I'm some kind of weird freak.
Yeah.
And it's like it's just a job. Honestly, it's just a job. It's a legal job. It's a
Yeah.
job I chose to do. I'm not gonna do it for you for free. So I
No.
think people are worried I'm gonna hop up on the table and start twerking or something. I'm like, you're not paying me and I'm off the clock.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, goodness. I mean, like I just sit here and I'm like frustrated on your behalf that that has to be the way that it is just like infuriating. Because yeah, I mean, and like, me from 10 years ago would have been horrified. Me now is like, yay. But so I understand both sides of that coin. But yeah, it's frustrating. I'm frustrated on your behalf that it's like you've almost had to create that bubble for yourself. Yeah.
Oh
Um,
yeah, me 10 years ago would have had the same reaction of like, you need to come back to Jesus.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm curious what you would say to like your teenage self if you could.
Leave the church,
Uh,
run. There's nothing wrong with you.
yeah.
You're healthy. You're sweet. Like
Yeah.
the church is taking advantage of you.
Yeah.
Go make friends.
Where, sorry.
Oh, go make friends outside of the church and don't try to convert them.
Yeah. Yeah. Little caveat, but it's powerful. Um, I'm curious where your sense of spirituality is now.
So I'm an atheist now. I feel like I fall somewhere between atheist and agnostic.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I definitely don't think that Heavenly Father is real,
Mm,
and I'm okay with not knowing.
yeah.
Um, I feel like atheist is kind of a harsh term because it's almost dogmatic in its own way of like there is no God, there is no supreme being. It's like, well,
Mm,
you don't know that.
yeah.
Maybe we're little cells inside of a larger being. Like we don't know.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm okay with that. And I went through a pagan phase
Mm-hmm.
until it got a little woo woo and I started to see that it was just like not really grounded in reality either.
Yeah.
But I did take away from that a much greater respect for nature, where I
Mm-hmm.
didn't have that respect when I was Mormon, which
Yeah.
is weird. They say that God created the earth, but then they don't treat the earth very well at all and don't care about it.
Mm,
So I've gotten a lot more into just connecting with nature and just really like that's kind of my spirituality is just existing in the real world and
yeah.
not needing this fantasy world to escape to because when you actually get grounded in this world and you pay attention to it like it's a beautiful world, it's magical enough, it doesn't need anything else.
Mm-hmm.
Just connecting with my pets, like my pets can say I love you.
Yeah.
They can actually say I love you. And like that's a spiritual moment for me,
Yeah.
like seeing a magical sunset. Like that's my connecting with the greater universe.
Yeah. And I think for a lot of people who choose to leave like organized religion behind, it is just around like spirituality is an equation to connection with yourself and connection with the world around you. And that, like you said, can be an inherently spiritual experience. It doesn't have to be with something metaphysical or divine or anything like that. We can have a spiritual experience with another person or with a tree, or, with a sunset, like you said, or a beach or something. We can have spiritual experiences without it having to be in in another realm or something. So, if that's what you choose to do, and I think that's the biggest thing. So, I like to finish these episodes with some encouragement for people, which is, what would you say to someone who is fresh in their deconstruction? So they've either just left the church, they're just like the foundation is crumbling, it's just all falling apart for them. What would you say to those people?
Recovery is possible
Mm,
and it does get easier. And it's not you, it's not
yeah.
you being crazy, it's those thought processes that were put into you.
Mhm.
And it is important to do the not only deconstruction, but the reconstruction. You
Yeah.
need to form new neural pathways that are healthy. that aren't telling you that you're a worthless piece of shit sinner, you know.
Yeah.
I talked to someone yesterday. We did a little collab, and she was saying she left at 18 and it wasn't until she was 50 that she realized she was still running on those old thought processes, and
Mm-hmm.
she needed to do the, I call it brain surgery.
Yeah.
She needed the brain surgery and upload some new thought
Mm-hmm.
processes so that you can have a functioning healthy life.
Yeah.
And there's so many support groups now and therapists and places that you can go to recover. That I feel like it was just within the last like 10 years or so that this conversation has kind of blown up
Yeah.
about religious trauma.
Yeah, absolutely. I think even here in it's been much more prominent in the US for a little bit longer, but particularly in Australia and New Zealand, in our part of the world, it's probably only been in the last 5 or 6, I would think, that it's been quite and it's getting louder and louder, and it's probably because there are people like me and a whole few others who are trying to be really loud about it. But it's good. It's great because it means, I mean, it's part of the reason why I started this podcast was so that people felt less alone and that they weren't the only people going through that process of brain surgery, like you said. I love that. I love that term. I typically will say like random things like uninstalling and reinstalling, the programs that you want in your system. But it's any sort of like, regardless of the terminology you use, it's a process. But I love when people just sit there and they say, it's possible. And I think sometimes that's all people need to hear is that recovery is possible. So I love that. Thank you so much for joining me.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
I've loved this conversation. I love what you do. I love that you're talking about it. And keep talking about it and keep smashing stigma and patriarchal bullshit. And I love it. So thank you.
Well, yeah, same to you. Thank you for doing what you do and being loud. And yeah, that's what I'm trying to do is get loud about this
Mhm.
issue and just raise more awareness. And so keep doing what you're doing.
Amazing.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Beyond the Surface. I hope you found today's conversation as insightful and inspiring as I did. If you enjoyed the episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with others who might benefit from these stories. Stay connected with us on social media for updates and more content. I love connecting with all of you. Remember, no matter where you are in your journey, you're not alone. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep moving forward. Take care.